Good morning, members of the MAG Regional Council. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating in the room and via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. And please, if you're making a motion online, that really does help us. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to a MAG representative. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available for MAG staff. We will now begin with the roll call of all members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Mayor Beck. Mayor Bien-Wilner.
Here.
Thank you. President Burnett. Mayor Crane.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Daniels.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Giles. Supervisor Goodman.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hartke.
Here.
Thank you. President Javier.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hermosillo.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Lavalde.
Here.
Thank you. Governor Roe Lewis. Mr. Meck.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Molina.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Morris.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Ortega.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Pereira. Mayor Peterson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pizzillo.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Rodriguez. Mayor Schultz.
Present.
Thank you. Supervisor Sellers.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Sykes.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Walter. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Chair Weiss.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wheatley. Mayor Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Here.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you for that. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Our next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Ms. Barker, I know you wanted to speak a consent agenda, but you had 2 cards, so help me out here.
And okay, there it is. I guess my request to turn the speaker request on was forgotten. So that's how I can help you if you help me. And with those cards, no, I just decided that we've got several things on the agenda that, I would just sort of let you know rather than bifurcate everything. separate everything. So I'll speak on all of them. And I just blew in here today. This was unbelievable. I was thinking, renewable energy, we really should have those windmills up. And, it's just not today. I live downtown Phoenix, and quite often I lose my hat. As you see, I don't have one on today. But, we've had some really positive things happen in this, and your communities probably, I would think, prosper through the last couple of weeks with all of the excitement of not only the Super Bowl with the Phoenix Open. And I got to speak, you may know this name, Rick Neymark. He used to be with the city of Phoenix. He was with the Hans Park Conservancy, and he shared at the neighborhood meeting last night that they had, like, on an average of 75,000 people coming into the park daily during the Super Bowl. When it was open for 4 days, and on Saturday it was 86,000, and that has to be pretty accurate because they had people coming through a counter. I was over there and I thought it was really conducted well. People were having fun, not only with the game, but with the various bands, and they brought blankets to sit on the grass. And the grass wasn't super wet or anything because we didn't have it raining. The other thing I was just wondering, since you folks are involved with transportation and mobility, and I got my card for multimodal transit, it feels good. The thing is that we had more people, as I pointed out, walking around and using, our transit to get downtown. And I think that was pretty much of an aid. But guess what? The Eagles got caught on I-10 going to the game now. Did anybody investigate if the KC happened to have like a weight monitor out there on that? Anyway, folks, I'm looking forward to our transportation plan. And after discussing this with the mayor, who let me know that the condition of our roads needs to be maintained, and that factor needs to be put into your plan. I think you know that. This idea of build it, they will come, you got to scrap that and put it, we won't build it unless we have funds to maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Item number 4 is the Executive Director's Report. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council. I have 3 items for your information this morning. The first one is MAG, once again, as part of our Emerging Technology Program, was recognized by the Institute of Transportation Engineers for our very innovative use of drone data collection and some artificial intelligence powered video to identify specifically around light rail stations. So this drone data gives us exact information about how people are accessing the light rail stations, which is a safety issue here in the Valley. So it's something that continue to demonstrate emerging technologies. It's a good example of being recognized nationally for that program. Again, next slide. Very happy to report that MAG has been honored as Employer of the Year by the Women's in Transportation chapter here in Arizona as the 2023 Employer of the Year. I want to thank Maricopa County for nominating MAG for this award. Really came as a big surprise. So once again, recognize your all leadership in terms of transportation here in the Valley and moving the region forward. So very proud of this award. This will be a ceremony, I think, April 1st at the WTS annual ceremony. Next slide. Final thing I have for you today, in cooperation with Vitalist Health Foundation, the Arizona Community Foundation, MAG is participating in the Promising Home Housing Practices webinar. This is a free online event, March 7th, 10 to 11:30. Speakers will include our own chair, Mayor Weiss of Avondale, and Council Member Stewart of Chandler in that event. So if you have an opportunity, register. The link's there on the page. Hope to see you there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I have for you today.
Eric, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Item number 5 is consent agenda. Are there any members who wish to have an item removed for separate consideration? Anyone online? Hearing and seeing none, can I get a motion on the consent agenda, please?
Move to approve the consent agenda items as agendized.
Second, Mayor Hermosillo.
I'm sorry, who is the second?
Mayor Hermosillo.
Thank you, Alexis. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do you mind doing a roll call of the members online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will call all of those members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Mayor Crane.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey.
Aye.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mayor Hall. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Mayor Hall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. President Javier.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hermosillo.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Lavalde.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Meck.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Molina.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Pizzillo.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Schoaf.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson.
Very nice.
Mayor Wilson.
Whoops, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. And Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you for that. Thank you for members of the committee. Item number 6 is ratification of the action taken by the MAG Regional Council Executive Committee to select a new MAG Executive Director with possible executive session. Ms. Barker, you had indicated that you wanted to speak on this issue.
Thank you, Chairman Weiss. Ed Zerker is the person that is up for this position. I don't know what kind of opposition, but from knowing Ed from, I think the first time that he was over at the city of Phoenix back in about 93, I followed the actions of Ed, and even he was here leading, I believe, the management committee. And when he left, it seemed like people really, really appreciated the work that he did here. He is somebody, I believe, in multimodal transportation. I know that some of you may not agree with me, but I know a person can live here without an automobile. And many people, I've lived in different 7 cities and was earning a living, even though it was meager, without an automobile. It wasn't always so romantic. I could tell you some stories that I survived. But what I'm saying is that Ed Zerker knows about not only the automobile, but the transit. He was a transit director. I don't think that there's anybody else that probably would be more fitting in this position as executive for the community. Phoenix has long time been into transit. And so I'm standing here in support of Ed, and any disagreement I ever had with Ed, you can come and talk to me about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. I think Mr. Zerker was blushing in the background. So just a little background information for the record. On January 30th, 2023, Eric notified the MAG Regional Council of his retirement effective July 1st, 2023. On February 13th, 2023, the MAG Regional Council Executive Committee unanimously voted to begin negotiations with Mr. Ed Zerker on a 2-year contract to serve as the next MAG Executive Director. These negotiations will start upon ratification by Regional Council today of the Executive Committee's action. The contract resulting from these negotiations would be offered to the Executive Committee for approval and then finally to Regional Council for ratification. And just for a note on this, If regional council decides to move forward with these negotiations, I'm going to ask for a virtual executive committee meeting on Friday. If the executive committee at that point wants to move forward, I will call for a virtual meeting of the regional council next Tuesday. So just be aware of that. At this point, I want to take a moment and thank Eric for his service to MAG many decades. And while this is not the cake eating part of this retirement, we'll get to that in a few months. His leadership has produced probably the finest transportation organization in the nation. And for that, we are grateful. Eric's knowledge of not only transportation, but how to lead a large organization the size of MAG makes him uniquely qualified and a hard person to replace. I think the thing that stands out about Eric is that with all of us in the room, Eric has cultivated some really good relationships. And I know, Eric, when I was not chairman, you and I didn't know each other very well, but I feel that we've gotten to know each other pretty well over the last, it seems like 10 years, but it's been 8 months. So the goal of this was to bring someone to the regional council that they could vote on, someone who had extensive transportation knowledge, who had relationships at the legislature, who understood the governmental process, and who could step into a large organization like MAG. Those are few and very far between. Also part of this discussion was that we are in almost, and I hate using the word crisis, but with the legislature being in session right now and bills going back and forth, Eric's focus on the organization is on projects that have to be done by July 1st. Bringing Mr. Zerker on board allows Mr. Zerker to focus not only on transitioning from Eric, but also on our needs immediately for transportation and getting the bill before the voters in November of 23. So while this is not a final farewell, Eric, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done for the organization, and just stand and give you a round of applause. Sir.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support through my 5 years as executive director here. I've been working with MAG both inside and outside the agency since 1983. And as I've told people, it's one of the better jobs I've had. So it's the best job I've had. So once again, I appreciate your support. We can't accomplish what we need to accomplish without the support of our member agencies, and also a tremendous staff here, which I just can't thank for their support. They've just been 24/7 for the last few years working on the extension, and just a remarkable group of people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mayor Ortega, I want to mention Eric as your mayor and in Scottsdale. We do have several commission potential positions, and I hope we'll be knocking on your door in August. So especially that we have large bond issuances and
He's taking
other
notes right now.
other interesting things. So thank you for releasing us, for releasing him to us.
Well, we're here to serve Scottsdale, so it's perfect. Does anybody have any questions? We have members of the executive committee here. I will try and answer as many questions as I possibly can, but I think we have all members of the executive committee here or online. So anybody in the room that has any questions, Mr. Zerker is here. If needed, I've asked him to say a few words, but not sure if that's going to be necessary, but we'll kind of go from there. Anyone online? That being said, and not seeing anything, any comments? Can I get a motion on this issue?
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to ratify the action taken by the Regional Council Executive Committee on February 13, 2023 to enter into negotiations with Ed Zerker for a 2-year contract to be the next MAG Executive Director.
And I second Mayor Hermosillo.
I have a motion from Mayor Osborne, a second from Mayor Hermosillo. All those in favor in the room say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Could we do roll call of the members online?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'll go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Mayor Crane?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Dickey?
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Hall?
Aye.
Thank you. President Javier?
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Hermosillo.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor LaVault.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mack.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Molina.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Pizzillo.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Schoaf.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Mayor Beck with Peoria.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Beck. Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Zerker, did you want to say anything or do you want to hold any comments for later on?
I'll be very brief and just express my thanks and congratulations to Eric. I had the chance to work with Eric for a lot of years, including, I think, perhaps helping talk him into the Valley Metro position that he did for a little bit of time. It's going to be great to get back to work with the MAG staff who I've worked with, and with all of you. I worked with some of you in my past life. Those of you I don't know yet, I look forward to it. My phone is available and on, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to come visit you in your city or your town or your county or your Indian community, to get to see you there and learn about your issues there. But look forward to the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zerker. Appreciate it. So just for clarification, members of the executive committee will receive an email probably sometime later on today, tomorrow, for a meeting on Friday. Depending on how that goes, we will have a virtual meeting of the regional council on Tuesday. So just be prepared for that. Eric, item number 7, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council, this item relates to the 2023 RAISE grant applications, can be presented by Patrick Stone.
Thank you, Chair, members of Regional Council. My distinct pleasure to be following that previous item. I don't know how I got this one in the agenda, but I'm excited about it. If I could get the next slide, please. So fiscal year 2023 RAISE grant, the notice of funding opportunity was issued this last November on the 30th. That notice of funding opportunity was then amended on January 5th to bring in the funding from the fiscal year 2023 federal appropriations bill. As you can see on the screen, the original NOFO had $1.5 billion available in funding, and then the appropriations bill added another $800 million in funding for $2.3 million for this cycle. One thing I did want to note, maximum award size, for the normal NOFO, the IIJA funding, the award size is $25 million. But if you would like to compete for, the appropriations funding alone, maximum award size is $45 million. Similar to previous RAISE cycles, but the funding is split equally between urban and rural grants. And I did want to make a note that, and especially you'll see in a couple of slides, planning grants, at least $115 million is allocated for planning grants. And again, $35 million is allocated for areas of persistent poverty or historically disadvantaged communities. Applications are due February 28th. If I can get the next slide, please. So I'm going to go through the grants that we've received that we're asking for your support today. The first is from the city of Glendale. It's an infrastructure improvement grant in downtown Glendale. This would construct various pedestrian, ADA, and lighting improvements in central Glendale in an area bounded by Bethany Home Road, Northern Avenue, 51st Avenue, and 67th Avenue. Total project size is $9.6 million, and the city is asking for $7.7 million in RAISE funding. Next slide. This next slide and this next project is for the city of Goodyear. I did want to note this is also going to be a co-application with the city of Glendale. And this request is to widen Camelback Road between State Route 303 and 152nd Avenue to expand that facility to a 6-lane arterial. The total project cost is $75.9 million, and the city is requesting $25 million in RAISE funding. So the next project is for the city of Scottsdale. They're looking to do a complete street project in Old Town Scottsdale on 2nd Street between Goldwater and Drinkwater Boulevards, along with providing a bicycle and pedestrian connection to 75th Street. Total project size is $19.2 million, and the city is asking for $15.3 million in RAISE funding. And then the final capital grant that we have today is for the city of Tempe to construct a new bicycle and pedestrian bridge over Tempe Town Lake. This project would also provide connectivity to other pathways in the region. The city's project size is 16 million and they're asking for 10.5 million in raised funding. Next slide, please. So we do also have 2 planning grants, hence my note earlier. The first is for the town of Gilbert for the Veterans Memorial Pedestrian Bridge. The town is asking to get a planning study to complete the design and pre-construction activities for a new pedestrian bridge over the Union Pacific Railroad that would connect Gilbert's heritage district, with Veterans Memorial Park. Their total project cost is 1.9 million and the town is asking for 1.5 million in raised grant funding. And then the final request is for the city of Phoenix. They're asking to fund the design and pre-construction activities for the Levine Area Conveyance Channel. This would include updating the channel and a multi-use path and pedestrian improvements. Total project cost is 6.3 million and the city is asking for 5 million in raised funding. And with that, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council, that concludes my presentation. I'd be available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a great job following. So that was perfect. Are there any questions on this issue? Any mayors who have applied that want to speak on this? Mayor Sellers, or I'm sorry, Chairman Sellers?
Yeah, I just a comment. I was recently at the National Association of Counties legislative conference, and certainly one of the priorities of the current Secretary of Transportation is centered around safety. He pointed out that his goal is to have 0 fatalities, and we're at like 42,000 a year right now. And you know, for people that think that's a totally impractical goal, he pointed out that a few decades ago, we had airplane crashes virtually every day, and people didn't talk about it very much. Now, every time there's a crash, it's a very, very significant event. So he really thinks that we have a long ways to go, but this is an achievable goal. And he pointed out that pedestrian fatalities are the fastest increasing part of the transportation fatality situation. So I think these grants are absolutely pointed in the right direction.
Thank you, Jack. Mayor Ortega?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to point out, of course, Scottsdale's pretty well world renowned for our green belt, which is about 11 miles long, north-south. This is the connectivity that goes to the west and links in the bike paths and pedestrian corridors into our Old Town area. So it's very, very significant. That also is part of our model sustainability design and will accommodate tree canopies and so forth. So all of this will evolve out of safety as well as the linkages that we need. One of the last things I'll say is it starts somewhere and it loops around through Old Town. So it's not just back and forth. It's not just linear. And I think that's a big plus. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other mayor who'd like to speak on the project happening in their city? Hearing and seeing none, can I get a motion on this item, please?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mayor Harkey, a second from Mayor Ortega. Can I get a voice vote of those in the room? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Can you do a roll call of the members online, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'll go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Mayor Beck?
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Crane.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Dickey.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. President Javier.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Emersil.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Lavault.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Meck.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Molina.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Pizzillo.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Schultz.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, members. Appreciate that. Eric, item number 8, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. We're going to have Katie Gentry, who's the MAG Regional Homelessness Program Manager, giving you an update on moving forward the work of Pathways Home, our homeless plan. Katie?
you, Eric, and members of Regional Council for this opportunity to provide an update on Pathways Home. Next slide, please. A quick overview of my presentation. I will give you progress on the action steps made, an update on House America and our housing targets, and then talk through some next steps. Next slide. Next slide, please. A quick overview of our progress on our action steps. All of our actions are currently underway or ongoing, with 2 actions being done with the accomplishment of both the interdepartmental teams toolkit and the community court toolkit. And we could not do this without the work of all of your staff through the local jurisdiction committee. Want to quickly highlight, we have a couple evaluations underway. We're continuing to refine our funding filter to understand the breadth of funding going into homelessness, and working with partners to develop resources on things like employment, prevention, and diversion. Lastly, I wanted to highlight the work on the regional public education campaign that will be coming to you all next month to get your feedback. Next slide, please. Before I jump into housing targets, I wanted to highlight the success of House America. We exceeded our goal, which ended in December. Really excited about that, and we could not have done it without the work of you and your teams. We were able to rehouse 1,268 people experiencing homelessness and add 337 units into the development pipeline between September of 21 and December of 2022. You all should have seen a press release that went out, as well as we've been featured on a couple different radio stations. Next slide. Oh, next slide. Wanted to do a quick background on our housing targets. When we did these initial projections back in 2021, in order to reduce by 25%, we said we needed 770 temporary units and 1,225 permanent units. Our current projection, we've shifted to a quarterly update, so this will continue to come to you all over time. We need 382 temporary housing units and 1,382 permanent housing units. The biggest changes of those is we're continuing to see changes in people experiencing homelessness, and we've put a lot of money into temporary housing, and specifically in response with COVID funding. And I'll jump into that in just a second. Next slide, please. Diving into that a little bit further, I wanted to talk about funding costs. So the total funding estimated is just over $120 million to fund all of our temporary housing units, just over 4,000 units. 56% of this funding is temporary housing. Of the temporary housing is with COVID response dollars. So that's a combination of CARES and American Rescue Plan dollars. An additional that 44% have been funded over the last 3 years with some of that CARES and American Rescue Plan dollars, but not completely funded through that. Next slide. Jumping into that a little bit further with a breakdown, the majority of those are for singles and couples shelter. We also have a percentage, 14% for families, and some other subpopulations highlighted on this screen. I'll break down this a little bit further, but first I want to give you a highlight on the permanent housing. Next slide. You kind of see the opposite here. We have a $76 million, but the majority of that is not COVID response funding. A lot of this is ongoing funding, like our continuum of care funding, access state Medicaid funding, and other federal sources like the VA, the Veterans Affairs, and Public Housing Authority units. So you see kind of this different contrast. Next slide. However, I do want to highlight that our permanent housing is not near enough of what we need it to be. We have far less housing placements than our needs. So I mentioned a couple slides back that we need 1,300 per month on an ongoing basis. But in December, we only placed 112 people into housing. And part of that is because of the lack of housing availability and funding to support that housing on an ongoing basis. Next slide. So as we think through these costs around shelter and housing, we really need to talk about how we're going to best use our resources and how to use them the most effectively. And so I just put 2 really large numbers up in front of you of 120 million and 76 million. And I want to give you a little bit of background. The cost of 120 million on shelter will serve over 16,000 people throughout the year. So it's not just a direct breakdown of those 4,000 units. But the 76 million on housing served about 1,436 households last year. And so really, as we start to think through it with you and your staff, we're trying to figure out how do we best balance the funding to ensure that we can quickly move people through the homeless response system and back into housing to reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness and really move to our goal of ending homelessness. But we also are thinking about how do we best use those services throughout? So how are we leveraging other resources? How do we make sure there's pots of funding at every single element so that we are able to rehouse people quickly and understand that not every single person is going to need a housing placement, but there are other resources that we can offer them in order to address homelessness. Next slide. Want to talk quickly about next steps. We're going to continue to dive further into these funding questions with all of you and your staff. Continue implementing all of the steps of the plan with many of the action steps underway, and then building out what I'm claiming is a phase 2 action plan. So really continuing to build off of the action steps that we have, but knowing that there is still more work to do, and our team is here to support you every step of the way. Next slide. Here's my contact information. Happy to answer any questions that you all have, and available for any comments as well.
Katie, I think your presentations are the highlight of this committee's day when you're up there. So I appreciate the energy. I appreciate the passion that you have for this. Mayor Harkey.
Katie, thank you. Related, not totally related, the point in time count, I'm not asking for results yet. I know that that takes a while, but my question is, how did the process go this year? And when do we hope to see some quasi final results?
Thank you, Mayor Harkey. The process went great. I think we had a really successful pick count. We had over 1,000 volunteers out across the valley, and really excited how many people were interested in the point in time count this year. We do anticipate to see results mid-April. We'll be working with all of your staff, and then be coming back to you all at Regional Council at the end of April.
Thank you.
Is there anyone online who has a comment for Katie? Anyone else? Katie, thank you. Eric, item number 9, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Item 9 is going to be presented by Amy Epley, who's MAG Accounting Program Manager. We'll be talking about the development of our next annual work, 2-year work program covering fiscal years 24 and 25. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the MAG Regional Council. Thank you for letting me present today on MAG's development of the fiscal year 24 and 25 biennial unified planning work program and budget for information and discussion today. MAG is in the process of developing the 2-year work program for fiscal year 24 and 25. We began presenting on the UPWEP in January and will continue to provide updates through May when the final draft is presented for approval. This month, MAG is presenting an updated draft dues and assessments for fiscal year 24 and 25 and the ongoing new and ongoing projects. In March and April, we will provide a draft and updates. Next slide, please. In your agenda package, you will see attachment A, which is the fiscal year 24 and 25 draft dues and assessments. The changes include for fiscal year 24, an increase to the 911 assessment in the amount of $92,416 to cover a portion of the cost associated with the independent review of the region's 911 system, which was approved by Regional Council in January. Keep in mind, MAG is paying these costs in fiscal year 23, but we will be recouping a portion of these costs in fiscal year 24 only with this increase in assessment. Fiscal year 25 includes an update to the rates of the 12-month CPIU for the amount of 8.0167%. Next slide, please. In your agenda package, you will find attachment B, which is the proposed projects. It provides a listing of the new and ongoing projects budgeted for fiscal year 24 and 25 funding. There's various details, including the name, the description, the cost, time, and MAG area of core focus. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. My contact information is available, and I'm open for any questions you may have. And as a reminder, this is for information and discussion.
So little background, Amy, on Monday, we had executive committee and Amy got up there and was doing her the thing that you just saw. She got about a quarter way through. We had to stop her for another vote. So she sat down and kind of did her thing and came back. So I'm glad we could get through all this in just one step. Are there any questions for Amy on this issue? Anyone online? Thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, item number 10, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. Scott Wilkin, who's the MAG Data Advisory Program Manager, is going to do a presentation on our progress on developing the new series of socioeconomic projections for the region, very key for our planning activities. Scott?
Thank you, Chair, members of the Regional Council. Scott Wilson, Regional Analytics. We're in the beginning phases. I'm gonna turn the mic on and you'll be able to hear me better. We are in the beginning phases of creating our next generation of long-range economic projections. I can have the next slide. Our current set of projections goes through 2025. We adopted that 4 years ago. This is something we do every 3 or 4 years. And this next set will go out to 2060, so long-term. These projections are very key to the transportation models and air quality models. And as I said, we adopted these every 3 or 4 years, 3 times a decade per executive order 2011-04. Next slide, please. We get county level control totals from the state demographer's office when we do these projections. And then our model allocates the population, housing, and employment down to the parcel level, basically, so that we can project at any geography that we want, really. The population projections come from the state demographer. We got the employment projections from the University of Arizona. As you can see on the screen, this is what the county level population and employment projections look like. The solid line is historic growth, and then the dashed line is what's projected through 2060. As a note, the projections for population and employment are not that different from what we had 4 years ago. A little bit lower, but not appreciably so. Next slide, please. Over the past month, we've met with members, staff from 21 member agencies to talk about the inputs we have for the model, land use, developments, things like that. Those are the critical elements that go into our model that the model is based on. We met with staff from planning, economic development, transportation, and water resources. We talked to them primarily about developments and land use. Do we have anything wrong in our data sets? Do we have anything missing? Anything that needs to be updated? We also talked about long-range water concerns to see if there's anything that we need to know regarding infrastructure or specifically water. Are any parts of your member agencies that need to not have as much development as other places? Or is there a cap on population that we need to know about? For the most part, there was not. We were able to move forward with the model as the model sees fit, and we can allocate the population employment down to those parcels as it makes sense. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll be developing the first draft of the projections, and we'll review those with member agencies throughout March and April. And at that time, if there are any concerns with infrastructure, we can still adjust the draft projections and make changes based on that, or anything else, really. We're planning on taking the draft projections to the Population Technical Advisory Committee in May, and then we'll bring them back to management and regional in June for final adoption. Next slide. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Are there any members of the committee who have a question for Scott on this issue? Hearing and seeing none. Scott, thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, item number 11, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council, Nathan Pryor will give an update, legislative update. Nathan is the MAG Policy and Government Relations Director. Nathan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regional Council. Next slide, please. I'm going to focus much of my conversation today on our Prop 400 extension efforts. But before I do that, I'm going to touch on a federal issue. This year and last year, Senator Kelly has introduced the Highway Formula Modernization Act. We've been reporting on this issue for a number of years. This is a fast-growing states issue. So states like Arizona, obviously growing very fast, states in the Intermountain West, Sun Belt states, fast population growth. We've also, by way of reminder, as you can see on the slide here, we developed a federal issue paper, recently updated that on this issue. I was in Washington, D.C. In January and had an opportunity to meet with Senator Kelly's staff to discuss this and other issues. So grateful that Senator Kelly has once again brought this forward. But a little bit of background here. More than 90% of federal highway assistance is distributed to states through 8 formula programs. And historically, Congress has determined formula factors for each individual program and updated the formula factors in each surface transportation reauthorization bill. But starting with MAP 21, the moving ahead forward for progress in the 21st century, back in July 2012, Congress has opted to base state apportionment solely on the state's share from the prior year and the amount of taxes paid into the Highway Trust Fund. This means that apart from changes in the gas tax, each state's federal apportionment continues to be based on funding formula created in Safety Lieu, which was the surface transportation bill enacted in 2005. So this is the key part in this, which uses population data from the 2000 census and the state's total lane miles of federal aid highways from 2007. So we are in obviously 2023, still being tied to factors going back to 2007 and 2000 population. So what will this legislation do? This act would require a study to consider, among other things, how funding allocations would change based on the latest available data, such as population and federal aid highway road miles. So thank you to Senator Kelly for introducing this. We would request that in your conversations with Senator's office that you thank him for reintroducing this. This does have bipartisan support. Senator Cruz has signed on as a sponsor as well. Obviously, Texas being a Sun Belt state, fast growing state, continues to be an issue. We've reached out to our metropolitan planning organization peers in the Intermountain West and encouraging them to reach out to their respective congressional offices and consider being a co-sponsor on this legislation. Next slide, please. So pivoting to enabling legislation for the extension of Proposition 400, just a couple of bills, of course, noting on the screen. I'll call your attention to first Senate Bill 1122, sponsored by Senator Farnsworth. That's got a lot of attention in recent weeks. In its introduced form, it would have allocated 5% for transit, down from the 40.4% adopted in the region's regionally adopted transportation plan. On Monday, February 13th, this was a subject of a number of amendments in the Senate Transportation Technology Committee. All those amendments failed. Of note, we'd like to thank Mayor Weiss, who spoke at that committee. Thank you for Mayor Weiss for carrying our message and speaking to the issues associated with Senate Bill 1122. Ultimately, that bill did fail 4-3, or rather 3-4. This is an important note here. We cannot underscore our gratitude enough for Senator Carroll, Vice Chair of that committee, for voting against that bill. So thank you to those who have reached out to Senator Carroll, thanking him for his support. And if you haven't done so, we encourage you to do that. As we have indicated in recent email updates, we are requesting that you do thank Senator Carroll. He does need to hear from you. He was a critical part of our legislative efforts last year, having introduced our House version of Prop 400E, along with then Senator Pace, who introduced the Senate version. Just a note that Senator Pace is now a member of our Transportation Policy Committee. He did join that committee and participated last week. So I'd like to thank Tyler Pace for his involvement in advancing our legislative efforts. Pivoting to more recent developments, focus on House Bill 2031, Strike Everything, sponsored by Representative Cook. This was heard in the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee last Friday. Again, thank you to Mayor Weiss for speaking to that committee. This is based on legislation that passed House and Senate last year. The proposed transit funding allocations in this legislation is at 20%. Again, by way of reminder, our plan in last year's legislation is at 40.4. However, the underlying framework of the bill is sound, and our efforts continue to focus on fixing the allocations. This is all very encouraging, and thank you to Representative Cook for sponsoring this bill. Ultimately, last Friday, 2031 was held to allow for stakeholder conversations in a meeting. So fast forward to yesterday, there was a meeting. Representative Cook held a stakeholder meeting on this. And the meeting was focused on identifying stakeholder positions to determine if areas of agreement could be found on this legislation. Some of the details of that meeting, there was near unanimous agreement by the group that enabling legislation was needed this session. Another point of agreement, almost complete agreement that legislation was needed to implement the plan. Much of the discussion focused on the need for transit, and in particular, the transit allocation needing to stay at 40.4%. There was no clear outcome. However, there was a commitment to continue stakeholder meetings. So we'll take that as encouraging. The next meeting has not been scheduled, but we'll work with Representative Cook and his staff. Again, appreciative to Representative Cook's willingness to take this up as an issue. This bill represents probably the best opportunity to date this session for legislation to move forward with the extension of Proposition 400. So what's next? Again, we'll continue our conversations with Representative Cook, Senator Carroll, and others, and continue to provide updates to member agencies. With that, Mr. Chairman, I am available for any questions.
Nathan, thank you for that. It's been a very busy week, not only for MAG staff, but for stakeholders involved in these discussions. I do want to take a minute. Last Friday, we had the opportunity to be in surprise with Mayor Hall, and Mayor Hall and his intergov Jody set up a meeting with Senator Carroll. He understands what we're trying to do here. He wants to help us with this, but he had a lot of attacks last week. So when we say please reach out to him, even if he's not in your district, please reach out to him. You may not get a call back, you may not get a reply on email, but for this body to show their support for him also sends the message to other legislators that they can put their necks out to and get this done. I feel without jinxing this entire effort, when I went to bed last night at midnight, I felt encouraged to what happened. I was on the phone with Representative Sun last night, who is a freshman legislative representative out of our district in Avondale. And she's also been trying to work on this. Do I think there's a pretty solid path forward? I do. The governor has shown a willingness to sign legislation that meets our needs. So we will keep you updated. I know I've had people from the community reach out to me on kind of where we're at on this. This is kind of your opportunity to ask Nathan questions and members of staff. I saw John and Audra here. So they've been in the trenches with all of us. And Liz from Avondale has been working, when I tell you 16 hours a day, I don't think that's an embellishment. I really think it's 16 hours a day. So thank you, Liz, for everything that you've done to help get this forward. Any comments from the committee? Jen?
So if 2031 is our best option, is that what I'm understanding from today's perspective?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Daniels, excuse me. Yes, at this moment, that's the vehicle we are focused on.
Unpack the black box of the legislature for me. This is such a interesting process, especially coming from the city world where I feel like it's really easy and straightforward and laid out and not so much at the legislature. Tell me the path that you anticipate this bill taking today.
Obviously, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Daniels, conversations are going to continue with Representative Cook. Obviously, procedurally, there's those waters need to be navigated in the legislature. It's never over till it's over. So there's opportunities for strike everythings to put legislative language on other vehicles. So that could definitely be an option going forward.
Can you tell me procedurally what the path forward is today?
Mr.
Besides
Chairman,
parting
Ms.
waters.
Daniels, outside of conversations with Representative Cook, still working on that path forward, but we remain optimistic with this vehicle.
So where is it right now? Because it's crossover week. So where is the bill today and where do we need it to be for it to have a future? Recognizing that there are procedural maneuverings, let's call it political ninja moves that can happen, but where is it today and where do we need it to be by the end of crossover week?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Daniels, there's opportunities beyond crossover week to do strike everything. So again, there's keeping all our options open.
Jen, I think where we're at right now is that there's things happening behind the scenes. And I understand Nathan's hesitance. There are so many things that could change within a few days. I will tell you that yesterday between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., things change 3 different times.
So I understand that, and I certainly appreciate it. And I realize that there's lots of conversations behind the scenes, but it's my understanding that without a strike everything, this bill doesn't move forward.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Daniels, again, we're looking at guidance from legislators kind of shepherding this through. So we're encouraged by that. Procedurally, I think we might have to look at a different vehicle and applying language to another bill. But it's never over till it's over.
There was, so on Friday, and I know, Jack, I think you've got some input on this. On Friday, there was some input from the 9th floor wanting to get something done. So again, I don't know what that looks like. I think right now, if I had to give you my guess, I would tell you that there's 2 very different takes on this proposition. One is what we've seen from Senator Carroll. The other one is what we've seen from other legislators. And the one from other legislators doesn't even come close to what we're looking to accomplish here. So,
and I really appreciate the political will of some of our legislators that have really stuck their necks out on behalf of this, both this session and last. And I don't want that to be undermined at all. I do think as a regional board, we want this and need this to be on the ballot in November. And it's probably time for us to start considering what those alternative paths look like outside of the legislature. And from what I can tell, the only way to do that is through a citizen referendum that we would all have to unite behind and work very diligently and quickly to make that happen. I'm watching what we're doing with the 5-year plan from an ADOT perspective and recognizing that essentially there are not a lot of options past 2025 without Prop 400 on the ballot, and the way that it will impact the state as a whole when it comes to transportation will be devastating, particularly to our rural communities in Arizona. And so I say this to say, I'm glad that we've sort of worked all these angles at the legislature, but at what point do we as a body determine that we're going to stop putting energy where it continues to meet opposition and start putting energy behind a different type of effort? And I'm not saying we have to make that decision today, but I think it's time for us to plant the seed and have the conversation.
So I think those of you who know me know that it's hard for me to focus on one thing. So I have a tendency to focus on multiple things and look at multiple aspects of a discussion. To answer your question, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think what you're talking about, we have a backup plan, and if needed, to answer your question, will be more. We stopped giving effort to this legislative plan when sine die happens and there's no movement on this. The speaker, the Senate president, can bring any bill forward at any time for a vote. They wield incredible power. So the roller coaster that we're all going through on this bill, when it's all said and done, is I think when this organization moves on. But I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Yeah,
and sine die is too late for us to make a decision to move forward with the 2023 ballot. So I agree with you. I don't say what I'm saying is not to stop legislative efforts. What I am saying is we probably need to clearly and deliberately pursue parallel paths in order to get what is necessary, needed, and most important, both to the region and the state.
That is, I will tell you that staff and executive committee fully understand that. Jack?
Yeah, I will just comment that I have been involved in communicating with a lot of these folks. And my 2 primary messages have been, because I don't think they really understand at the state level that how important it is, excuse me, for timing on this issue, that we really need to have something ready to go in 2023. There's been too many people thinking that because this doesn't expire until 2025, that we have time. Because of the way things are planned and put into our plans, that isn't true. The other thing I've been trying to communicate to these folks is that it does us no good to have something that doesn't cannot get approved by the voters. And so transit becomes a major key point in getting something that we can have approved by the voters. So a lot of us are working a lot of time to trying to make this happen.
Thank you, Jack. Mayor Ortega?
Yes, I see some positive strategy in highlighting the possible running backs, quarterbacks on this on our behalf in the legislature. I like seeing Cook in there. I'd like to get other Scottsdale legislators on board. But so I think that's a good approach. And we don't want to let the legislature off by signaling that, a referendum can be done when in fact, there's so much interest directly into the players. And I think it's a good combo right now that can get it done.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone online who has comments?
I do. Jenny Dickey.
Mayor Dickey?
Hey, just to clarify, we had a council person at that meeting that you were at, the 11/22, and purporting to speak for Fountain Hills and claiming that our contracted lobbyist was not representing us and was a rogue no on this vote. Me, council, other council, our town manager who is registered under Town of Fountain Hills, and our lobbyist who is still working until the end of next month. We're all no's on the bill. He came in and testified in support of it. And I just want you to know that that is not in any way, shape, or form our position. And I did write to senators, and I want to thank you for your clear emails to us, because then last night at the council meeting, I was able to clarify that we are a no, and use some of your language. So I appreciate it.
No, Mayor, thank you. Yeah, that I was sitting right behind him when he spoke. It was a little bit confusing, but I appreciate the email that you sent last week to clarify Fountain Hill stance. And I have a question for you. Is that the view from your City Hall office, or what is that?
No, it isn't, but it's up from the Overlook Trail. So come by.
Thanks. Anyone else? Thank you. Item number 12 is future agenda items. Are there any members who wish to have an item put on future agendas? Seeing none. Item 13, comments from the committee. Mayor Wires, any comments about Super Bowl? It was good.
I had a lot of people asking me, what did I hope to accomplish for the Super Bowl? And what I told people over and over and over is what I was praying for is that I would wake up Monday morning and all people would talk about is what a great event. And that's what happened. So second time, 2 out of 3 most watched Super Bowls, Glendale, Arizona. Can you say more?
Thank you, Mayor. There's no other comments.